Hello everybody, and welcome to the channel. In this video, we will be discussing the British Raj and its upcoming rework in the new Hearts of Iron 4 DLC, Graveyard of Empires. In this DLC, the British Raj, as well as three other countries, Afghanistan, Iran, and Iraq, will all be receiving new and updated focus trees. And in this video, I would like to discuss the possibilities of things we will see and what we could see. Let's first talk about the things that Paradox has already confirmed will be coming with the British Raj rework. So far, they've confirmed three things: the revival of the East India Company as a corporate state, freedom for the princely states, and a formation of a Pakistani and Bangladesh state. Alright, let's start this off in order of the confirmed things, with the revival of the East India Company. Now, I'm of two minds with this one, because there's two options I believe it could be. Number one, it could be a fascist path, because, as it says, it wants East India as a corporate state, which corporations running the state, very fascist kind of thing. So it could be a fascist path. Alternatively, which would also be interesting, is it being a cosmetic tag that would give you access to possibly unique trade laws and economy laws. Give it a little bit of a different flair, but keep it with the British Empire, because as it's called, it's the East India Company, which was a company of England. So I feel like if it would be a fascist path, that would want to break away from the United Kingdom rather than stay a part of it, if you understand what I'm saying. I'm not sure where they'd want to go with this. It's an interesting idea, but I don't think we've seen anything really like that in the game, so I'm not sure where they would go with it. Next up is freedom for the princely states. Now, the princely states are already kind of represented in the game with this princely states national spirit, as well as you can, I believe, modify it right here with princely state donations. Now, I'm not sure how they'd want to go with this one either, because the princely states, from what I understand, is a collection of different little princes and local rulers of India that supported the British Empire to keep some limited power, whereas gave a lot of it over to the East India Company, which eventually got absorbed into the British Empire, and various other things happened since then. I'm not sure what they would want to do. If it would just be a bunch of releasables inside of India, or if it would be maybe an option kind of like with the Polish path and the Congolese path, where you can invite a monarch and pick different ones, so possibly putting various different Indian princes in charge of India. That could be interesting to give you a more monarchist path for the British Raj, but also and give you multiple selections for them. That would be quite interesting, but if not, they could go in the way where it would just be a bunch of releasables, which the problem with releasing a lot of releasables is they're cool for lore and for roleplay and such, but objectively they don't give much benefit in the game, because they're just a weaker version of a starting nation, and almost always they have no national focus tree. They have the base tree, which, while very good, it's taking a minor and breaking it down into even more smaller pieces. Something they could do, though, is similar to Ethiopia, where Ethiopia has a bunch of releasables inside itself, but they all have access to this tree right here, which lets them eventually form East Africa. Now, while that is quite hard, because you are a minor of a minor power, it can be a fun challenge. So something like that, where they would get access to a sub-tree, would be interesting for the game, but also I feel like if this path would be used in A history and it just devolves India into a bunch of different states, it could very well lag down the computer. So I'm very iffy on it depends on how they will implement this in the game for whether I'm on board or not with that. The final item confirmed is the formation of a Pakistani and Bangladesh state. Now, this is already sort of represented in game, with both Pakistan and Bangladesh both being releasables of India, as well as the fact that when you become independent, Pakistan will break free from you, and then eventually Bangladesh will break away from Pakistan. It's also represented with the spirit marginalized Muslim communities, which can be modified with both the Cripps mission and two nation theory. If you are going down the Indian National Congress, well, you could do two nation theory regardless, but the problem with this is that regardless of if Pakistan breaks away and you go into the Indian Civil War, whether you win, lose, or if you want to cheese it and release them as a puppet so they never rise up, you can never get rid of this spirit. No matter how you deal with them, it will always be there, which is kind of a bummer. Now, I'm not sure what they will want to do with this because, on the one hand, it would be interesting to have Pakistan and Bangladesh, but the problem is that they're most likely not going to get much content on their own, and even if they do, how much do you really want to play as Pakistan versus just playing as the British Raj, which, with a rework, will most likely be able to core Pakistan, because right now, the Pakistani land is not cored except for northern Kashmir, which both have a core on. And as a result of this, it's the same with the princely states. It's realistically just a minor of a minor, which isn't very fun. If I want to play as a weaker nation in this region, Afghanistan's going to have a new focus tree. So, any path that will have the British Raj want to decolonize will instantly be a not very fun path, because we've already seen this with both the United Kingdom as well as the Netherlands, where the anti-colonial paths are not the favorites of the community. So I'm not sure if you would really want this to be a playthrough. It could be interesting, but I'm just not there yet. Now it's time to move into the more speculative section, the juicy parts, as I would like to call it. First up, what I would like to discuss is the possibility of a new formable nation, the Mughal Empire. Now, this would be a great formable nation, as it would give both Afghanistan, any content they give to Pakistan, as well as the British Raj, some form of formable nation. Because right now, the British Raj can do nothing. The British Raj cannot gain a single extra core. Now, while the British Raj does have a lot of resources and a lot of manpower, it's never fun to play a path where if you're trying to conquer others, you can't core or form new nations. I think that's one of the more fun things, is when you get to work towards a goal, such as a formable. So I would really enjoy them adding that. Plus, it would give a reason for Pakistan to have any kind of release, because then it could actually be used to core most of India and Afghanistan, where then it wouldn't be so not interesting as I had in the previous section. It would also give Afghanistan a very cool path, because it could most likely get a path that would be completely centered around the Mughal Empire. The next thing I would like to get into is the possibility of a joint focus tree. Now, I believe there's two options they could go with. Option one would be something very similar to the Belgian Congo, where just the British Raj and the United Kingdom get a shared tree. The second option would be more like the Scandinavian or Hungarian joint focus tree, where it would be for the entire British Empire. So it would be for the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the British Raj, and possibly even British Malaya. Now, out of the two, I believe the more likely would be the Belgian Congo sort of joint focus tree, which would be more about a balance of autonomy, because currently the British Raj's tree already has a balance of autonomy versus breaking free, and it already that's a very large core tenet of the tree already. So I believe they will continue to keep it with the Belgian Congo. It would be in spirit. The other reason is, while I believe a empire tree would be better, the British Raj on its own is a colony. It's not a dominion like the other four. So I believe we would have to wait for a different kind of DLC to receive that. Possibly with a instead of a country pack, it would be an actual DLC with maybe a rework to the autonomy system or something and the like, because while it would be cool to give countries like Australia and New Zealand content because their focus trees are very outdated and don't have a lot going on, I'm going to be honest, I see them going more the Belgian Congo route for now, working on Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and Canada with some more war effort patches, and then moving on from there. For the final wrap up of this video, I would like to go over the current British Raj tree, see if we can maybe extrapolate possible things they may do with the rework, or just discuss things I would like them to change and ideas and how they would work out. So starting with the political branch, it has three options, technically, but more like two. Because while there is a communist tree, a fascist tree, and then a historic democratic tree, both the communist and fascist civil war, it is basically a copy-paste of one another, as this was part of the first DLC, Together for Victory, which came out in 2016. This is one of the most basic trees left in the game, and while there's things that they have, like there is slight differences, they're very minute, whereas the communist seems to have more land, doctrine, army kind of aesthetic. The fascist tree seems to have more of an air focus with an event with Italy, and then giving you paratroopers, Japanese Army Air Force Academy, giving buffs to your research for planes. So maybe they keep with that style and make it more of a tank versus air builds for like the different play styles. But realistically, there's so little with these trees that I couldn't tell you where they're going to go in the future. Moving over to the historic section, it's very much the same. Pretty much most of the unique focuses to this side are research, or like this one adds technology, these are research buffs. It pretty much gives no indication of where they want to go, because while like this is because you stay with the British Empire and it's giving you support, but that way it doesn't really get, it's not really much for like the politics or like democracy versus possibly like different styles of democracy, breaking free, staying part of the empire, stuff like that. It's just there's not much to go off of. So I could speculate with like possibly like the East India Company being a part of this, maybe the princely states and stuff, but realistically there's not much I can go on. Moving on to the other parts of the tree, we'll go with the army branch, quote unquote army, because realistically all this is pretty much just research bonuses, and they're all 70 days, like 70 days for infantry weapon research. It's not like the screw gun's not terrible, and you can get extra generals and more and a officer spirit and such, but there's not much you can do with this, because like even the best of these focuses like Indian Gur Turks and Lions of the Great War give you recruitable population factor. You're India, like we have like minus 90% population factor, and we still have almost 500,000 manpower. It's just manpower is not really a great draw for focuses. And the problem with a lot of these focuses, they're so long and they give so little buffs that it's pretty much all going to have to be overhauled. There's nothing we can do with most of these. It's so much research that you can't do as India, because for the next issue, which is you start with 2 research slots, which is fine to start with 2, and you can reasonably get the third one not too hard. I mean, it's only 4 focuses in, and 2 of these you'd really want to do early game for like the Civ and for the Steel. The oil is not terrible to get. This is just a horrible focus. But then you get your research slot. The problem is for your 4th and 5th research slot, you need to be fully independent. But not only that, for this one, you need to have 50 factories, which as India, you start out with 16, and it's not the easiest to industrialize as India. And then this one's even worse because you have to be in a faction that has over 50 factories, which that's not so bad, but being in the faction is the issue. You also have to be at war, which, while in and of itself is not terrible, the fact that it also has to be fully independent. It's so many hoops to jump through. So pretty much you're locked at 3 research slots. So I hope they change that, because at least let you get 4 research slots while not being independent. If they lock 1 to being independent and make it where you can diplomatically get independent and not have your nation crumble as it does now, maybe that'll be okay, but as it is, that just really needs to be changed. Then they have like the air section, which realistically isn't very much. Like, again, 70 days for a couple air bases, a research model that's not even updated with the new DLC, stuff like that. It's not very strong. It's the same with the Navy. Your India, like, these can be stronger. They've gone through with war efforts and changed these, but still a lot of them are just very weak. So maybe the reason they held back is because they knew they were going to update it, so they just left them alone. But almost all of this just needs to be completely overhauled. Like, almost every one of these needs to be a 35-day focus or just doubled in effect. Moving over here is the interesting part, though. The clamp down on corruption and the strengthened ties with British investors. This is the reason I think we're going to get the Belgian-style joint focus tree versus like an Empire-style one. Because this right here just leads in so well to that, with you needing to improve your autonomy progress to 40%, then lose autonomy progress but gain industry, so, mills and sieves. Then clamping down on corruption and then administrative oversight. This just smells perfect for a joint focus tree where you're fighting with England over raising and lowering autonomy. And then you can add in the resources and add even more resource extraction over to it. That's realistically the reason I believe that it's going to have a Belgian style, Belgian Congolese style versus the Empire. Because it would be on theme and it would make sense, because it would fit more with the DLC, with it having just the India and Britain instead of a overhaul to everything, because I feel like we're gonna need a entire overhaul to the entire British Commonwealth, and that probably will be a country pack or DLC on its own. And adding a joint focus tree now would probably not jive with the new focus trees for these other nations. So making it where not to mention India itself is not a dominion, it's a colony. It would make sense that it would have its own thing with the United Kingdom fighting for autonomy instead of that kind of joint focus tree. I said the final thing I wanted to talk about was the focus tree, but there is one more thing I actually do want to talk about, which is the starting national spirits and leader. So the British Raj starts with 4 national spirits: agrarian society, which gives minus 70% recruitable factor; a risk of famine, which, if it's not solved, can cause a massive debuff national spirit that gives horrible penalties; marginalized Muslim community, which is more recruitable population factor of 20% away, plus minus 10 stability; and then princely states, which gives less autonomy gain. I want to talk about how these might be either changed, added to, or with more added to them in the future. So the reason they have agrarian society was because of basically balancing. India just has so much manpower. If it has access to it, and it can change its laws and such, which it can't do unless it's fully independent, which I just learned now. I've played India before. I did not realize that. It is stuck at volunteer only. Well, that's another thing that's going to need to be changed. It's fine that it's locked, but locked to fully independent is a little much. I guess it's the whole to keep it balanced when it's in the allies as an AI and or as just in multiplayer games, because like I said earlier in the video, India just has so much manpower. If it has access to it, it can just spam so many divisions. So I don't mind it being limited, but like when they added the administrative oversights, being able to change this but make it kind of hard and make it a sacrifice isn't bad. I'm cool with that. That can stay how it is, but it just make it. I don't like anything being locked to having to be fully independent, because it just means that it completely locks out paths. Unless they're going to make it where no path can't gain independence and it's not unreasonable, it can't stay that way. Now, risk of famine, that too will probably also stay, because it pretty much means that you have to clamp down on corruption. It makes you have. The reason it's there is basically it's so you have to do the Quit India movement, the two-nation theory and such, to raise your autonomy. Because if you don't raise your autonomy, you can't get risk of famine. And if you don't get rid of that, you get horrible debuffs. It's to make you do focuses that you could theoretically just ignore. But I would like it to maybe be more interactive, maybe more of a system than just you have this spirit, it can happen, it can't. Just a bit more interaction. Now, marginalized Muslim community. This one I hate the most, because even if you release Pakistan and Bangladesh, you can't get rid of this, and that's just the worst to me. While again, the population factor isn't the worst, the stability, it's not the worst focus, and if you do, where is it? It's the Crips mission, which only affect if you're doing a historical playthrough. It gives you less war support and less autonomy gain, which is horrible because, as I said, you need autonomy gain for this. So it's just annoying. Like it totally needs to be completely reworked. Same with princely states. You can modify it with princely state donations, and with the imperial service troops, which gets you 5% recruitable and minus 10% consumer goods, which is good. But again, you need autonomy for your industry tree and to get rid of risk of famine and to fix your agrarian society. So having it make you lose autonomy, you're fighting too many wars at once. Like India, I understand that it's meant to be hard and to balance everything out. And you can't do everything, but this just feels like it's every direction's hitting you hard. You just have no control because you can't remove these modifiers and can't improve them. Even if it was where you have to prioritize fixing these princely states and marginalized Muslim community, or industrializing and getting better research, you can't do both at the same time. You could do one or the other. That would be fine, because then you can make the choice. There is no choice. It's pretty much you just got to suck it up, deal with those bad modifiers, and go about it. So hopefully they change that. And I believe that's all I have to talk about. I believe I've gone over everything. Oh, I wanted to talk about the leaders. This is just a minor thing. I like when all the different leaders have different traits, even when they have multiple different leaders for the same political parties and such. Because I think it gives you a reason to pick different leaders. Sweden's a good example where when it has its first election, you can pick between keeping Pearl Albin or getting the various different. I like being able to pick what kind of direction you're going, because it just makes it more interesting. Because in the game, there's 4 ideologies, and you can't go non-aligned unless there's a monarchist path, or you start that way. So realistically, there's usually 3 ideologies, and they all have their own rules and laws. They make them specific, but that means you only can have so many paths, because usually when you have different paths, say we go with the Soviet Union, the communist path, they each have their own thing, but because of the ideology rules, they all have similar things unless the focuses change it. So unless the focus tree is good, the ideology locks a lot of what you can do. So I like having it where the leaders are just slightly different. It gives a little flavor to it. I believe that is in fact all I wanted to talk about. So thank you for listening to my unhinged rant on India, of all places. I'll see you in the next one.